Welcome to the Women Shifting Gears podcast driven by Hemmings. This is your home for inspiring conversations with women leading the way throughout the automotive spaces. I'm your host, Amanda Busick, and the power of this podcast is in the strength of this community. We believe that high tides rise all ships, and to each of you collaborating together to steer this ship forward, we see you, we recognize you, and we salute you. It's time to set sail. Another episode of Women Shifting Gears starts now. Jamie Little is a trailblazer. From the first female pit reporter to cover the iconic Indy 500 to the first female to take the reins as lead announcer on a nationally broadcasted motorsports series, there simply is no better sentence to start this Women Shifting Gears podcast driven by Hemmings. Entering into her third decade as a broadcaster, Jamie joins us in reflection on her first season in the booth on the ARCA Menards Series, including calling her boss directly for the position. She discusses her path in the industry up until this point and where her sights are set next as she continues to pave the way forward for women in motorsports television. Perseverance, rising to the occasion, and not taking no for an answer. Jamie Little has forever imprinted her impact on an entire generation of colleagues, teams, drivers, and fans alike. Bravo. Welcome to the Women Shifting Gears podcast driven by Hemmings. On this week, Jamie Little joins us as a guest. She just celebrated her 20th year as a broadcaster, and boy, what a year it was. And Jamie, as you kicked off your 20th season as a broadcaster, just prior to that, on November 16th in 2020, it was announced you would be the lead play-by-play of a national racing series, the first woman to ever do it, right in the ARCA Menards Series. How did you take in the day when that announcement was made?
I had to pinch myself, honestly. I'm like, okay, now it's out here. Now it's my time. I've got to step up and do this. I mean, I think that's what a lot of, first, if you want to tag that onto, a person that is doing something for the first time. To me, it was the natural next step. It's about time. As you said, I've been doing this a long time. I've covered so many different forms of racing, 2 wheels or 4 wheels. And I went to my boss and said, I'm ready. I want to try this. And he said, okay. I mean, Fox has been so great about that. They're all about growth and development. And if you want to try something, all right, we'll let you try it. And he called me back and said, what about doing the ARCA Menards series? And I'm like, I've never covered it. I really don't know much about it, but we can figure it out. So the announcement comes out literally like 3 weeks later. And it was like, okay, now you got to carry kind of that pressure because nobody knows what to expect. But I expect myself to be just like I am in every other role. Even though it's new and I don't know what to expect, I want to be the same person I always am. And I want to be authentic to myself. I'm not going to sound like one of the guys. I'm not going to look like one of the guys. I just want to be myself. And that to me will be a success. But as we got closer and closer, I mean, my first race was Daytona. Nothing like pressure, right? Just throw your ride in, the biggest race of the year, the most eyeballs. And, there was so much media around it. I guess that's just kind of where we are in society. When you're a female or you're a minority and you're doing things that haven't been done before, it's special. It really is. And I know that that's a big responsibility. And I said yes to every interview. I don't care how big or how small it was. And I think the more I did it, the more it was like, okay, just let this be a success. Sure. And all this talk, I don't want it to fall flat. So we did it, and it was an awesome year. I loved it. The challenge, the stepping out of that comfort zone. I always tell people I think it's so important to do that in your career.
So I can corroborate that story. I talked to Jacob Ullman to get a little background on how it all came about, and I was like floored when he said, Jamie called me. And, because Jacob knows who's in his bullpen. Yep. And when he told me that, my heart was just beaming for you at the idea that you called Jacob Ullman and said, hey, I'm ready for this next step. What led to that? I mean, the bravery and the confidence to say, I'm ready.
Amanda, I've always kind of been like that. I've never been one that's like, oh, well, I want to go from, pit reporting in the pits at a Supercross race to pit road at a NASCAR Cup race. I never expected myself to jump from one to the next. I always took the slow steps, developed myself, my skills and my craft, my relationships. And I just felt like, okay, I guess it is time. I've been doing this a long time. So what's next? Well, what's next is going up to the booth. And I knew that in my heart, but I just wasn't sure I was ready to take that step because what was I going to do? Xfinity or trucks or something? That's a big step up. And Lee Diffie, who does play by play everything from the Olympics to IndyCar, NASCAR, whatever, on NBC, out of the blue during COVID, calls me last November and said, "Hey, I've been thinking women are getting promoted to these play by play roles in other sports. I think it's time that we have a female in racing, and you're the one."
Wow.
And I was like, that is just so random. Because yes, we're
Ah,
friends, but we don't call each other. And I'm like, you're right. You're right. I was in a parking lot. I said, damn it, you're right. I hung up. I literally drove home and called Jacob Ullman. And I said, I don't know what's out there. I'm just putting it out there for you. When the spot opens up, I want to be that girl. And he's like, all right. And what were we, 2 months, 3 months later, there we were at Daytona.
prior to Lee Diffie calling, had you thought about it?
I had thought about it. I just didn't know because I wasn't really ready to say, hey, I want to do this. I don't want to take anybody else's job. And they're pretty secure in trucks, Xfinity, and Cup with us. I didn't want to take somebody's job, but I also didn't know, like, okay, is there any availability? I mean, what could I do? I had done the booth for one practice session before for Xfinity, and I knew I liked it. And it was completely different from pit road reporting. But I just wasn't ready to kind of, flip that switch and just let them know this is what I want to do. I don't do anything without a full intention. I don't just throw things around loosely. I really think about it. And when I'm ready, I'm ready. And like, I want the job now. And that's kind of where I was. I just needed that kick in the butt.
Well, Jacob definitely went on to describe you as someone for your perseverance, that you arise to all occasions, that your presence on TV is commanding, and that you are comfortable and you are credible. I want to go back to something that you said about the media attention around that first race and heading into Daytona, the biggest race of the season, and being the first at something. How did that raise the pressure of your first race as play-by-play?
Yeah, that pressure was raised a lot. I've been in a lot of pressure situations in my career, obviously covering the Indy 500 and being the first woman doing that. There was a lot of pressure. I remember calling my mom the night before saying, what have I gotten myself into? I just took photos with these men. It was me and 10 men who have been covering racing forever. They're racing royalty. Like, what am I doing? I could really ruin my career right now. And my mom's like, Jamie, just do what you've done every other time. Go out there and be yourself and do what you know how to do. And that's kind of how I approached this. But it was so interesting leading up to that first ARCA race in the booth. There were some sleepless nights. I'm not going to lie. I mean, I would think about it and do my homework. And then it's like, but what if I am not good at it? I could risk my reputation. And then what? Then it was all for nothing. So I definitely lost some sleep. There were some stressful days, but I just did more work. And I did some rehearsals and practices on Zoom with Phil Parsons calling races from before, which was very awkward. And then we went to Charlotte and did it together, like in a studio together. And that was much better. That gave me a lot of confidence. Like when we're sitting side by side, we're calling a race, we're having fun. It was more what I envisioned. So I'll tell you though, I was in the booth and all smiles. It all, it went just as I had hoped. I feel like I hit my marks where I needed to. Definitely was a little more nervous and probably not so much myself like I was a few races later. But as soon as that race was over, I went down the elevator, got in my car, and I sat there and I just started to cry. And I never cry. It takes me a lot to get me to cry. And it was like all the pressure was like, I did it. If I never do another one again, I did it. And that carries something with you, your confidence. And I think how much you love doing what you do.
They say a lot of times your growth can be at the end of your comfort zone. How far out of your comfort zone were you at in Daytona?
Yes, there are different parts of doing play-by-play that you're definitely out of your comfort zone. There's things like you do television, you understand how television works, live TV, your producers, things in your head, watching the action, understanding the storylines, but the timing of everything, talking nonstop, understanding how quickly things happen on the track and that you aren't just following a certain driver like you do in the pits. You actually have to call the names and numbers of everyone involved, or a side-by-side battle. When do you talk? When don't you? How high should your pitch be when you're excited about things? These are all things you're thinking of as a woman you don't want to be that yelling woman, but you also want to be authentic and get excited when the moment is right. So there were definitely moments that I was like, God, did I do that right? Did that sound okay? And I think just the fact that it was the ARCA series and everything was new to me, the names, the stories, but I had spent a lot of time. So I was really comfortable and excited to talk about that. But still, when they're racing and you're looking at numbers, it's like you're trying to compute things real quick. Okay, this number, this guy, okay, and this is his story. This, his family has school buses, there's those moments that are kind of outside your comfort zone that don't come as naturally when, you haven't covered somebody for years and years.
We'll be right back after a quick pause from our Women Shifting Gears, driven by Hemmings podcast, to hear from our sponsor, Covercraft. At Covercraft, they understand it's not just a car, it's tradition, passed from generation to generation. That's why for over 50 years, they've dedicated themselves to protecting the things that move you. They understand that the things they help you protect are the things that help you pursue your passions. And their passion is for finding the best ways for you to focus on yours without worrying about anything else. Covercraft, protecting the things that move you. The thing I am most proud of Jamie for is her learning curve she went through last year in the ARCA booth. She took a huge chance, evolved, listened to feedback, and gained so much confidence in 1 year. That had to be one of the gutsiest things I have ever seen an on-air talent do, and I have worked with many. Those are the words of Pam Miller, who you get to share the journey with. The last race of last year was in Kansas. How had you grown up to that point?
That's really nice to hear from Pam. As we know, Pam Miller has been such a trailblazer in racing. She's been a producer for years and years. I think it started back in Formula One days, and we worked together at ESPN for years. And that moment of her producing me at Daytona was really amazing. She's my pit producer for the Cup Series, but to be my main producer, she's kind of like your lifeline. When you're in that situation at Daytona last year and everything is new, your heart's beating, you can hear it in your headset, and you've got that calming kind of voice like, okay, it's Pam. She's got a good vision. She's going to hold my hand and tell me where we need to go. She won't lead me astray. It was great to have her and such a moment together. And I appreciate those words that she mentioned. But yes, to your question, Amanda, from Daytona to our last race was Bristol. The comfort zone was everything. It was night and day. I mean, it was doing a job at Daytona. It was just survival, getting through, hitting my marks, and not going off the tracks too much. I feel like about race 4 or so, I really felt like I was coming into my own. I could be myself, calling the cars, making, jokes, having fun with Phil and whoever the other analyst was. I just understood the flow better. So that allows you to be yourself. So I feel like by that last race, it was like, we're done. Like I'm just warming up. Like we need to do this every week. And that was one of the hardest things about ARCA was we did 8 races over the course of 8 months. And that's hard because you're jumping in and out of it. You're not doing it every week like we do pit road.
When you talk about the ARCA series, you also couple that with many other commitments throughout the year. How do you balance it all?
Well, I have a great foundation in my husband and my children and my 4 dogs. I have a great home life, and I feel like that sets me up for success every day. They support me in my journey. It's not always easy for them. It's not always easy for me or any of us that travel all the time, but they know what the end goal is. They know I love it. They know it balances me. I feel like being a mother makes me a better broadcaster because I have a purpose and I understand why I'm there. I'm not just there for myself anymore. And I feel like being a broadcaster, being put in the limelight and under pressure makes me a better mom and a better wife. And I don't always do a great job balancing. We have businesses too that my husband takes care of, but of course I have say and input there. I don't always do a great job just like anybody. And some days are better than others, but I wouldn't want it any other way. I love having chaos, but I have love everywhere. I love what I do. I love the people I work with, and I have so much love at home, and that just keeps me happy. And as long as I'm happy, I want to keep doing it.
Is there a particular career moment that you are most proud of?
Oh gosh. Yeah, there's been a few. They all kind of will run together after so many years, but there are moments, I think just the high pressure situations are the ones that you don't forget. How did I rise? Did I Did I make a statement? Did I open doors for other women? Those are the moments for me. And I feel like, gosh, there were moments in X Games back in the day. I mean, X Games was everything. And there were giant moments on television where I had to ask the right question at the right moment or report on somebody that was severely injured. Those moments, and how do you cover it and how do you conduct yourself? I feel like the day Dan Weldon was killed in Las Vegas, that was the hardest day I've ever had on the job. But I also proved to myself my strength and my ability to cover a situation despite my personal friendship and my personal feelings. I would say my first Indy 500 in 2004, it was an 8.5 hour broadcast live. We never left, even with rain. That was much more than me just getting to cover this giant race that the world was watching. It was a moment for women. We haven't looked back since then. There's always a woman on pit road. There's always a woman covering the race in some capacity. And to me, that's a huge win. And then, of course, doing the Daytona 500 for Fox when I switched over, and no woman had ever covered the Indy 500 and Daytona. And those are moments that I'm proud of. But, it doesn't mean I'm better than the other women that were out there. It just takes the right time, the right place, work ethic. There's just a lot of things that have to align for you to have those moments. And then back to, what we talked about in the beginning, and ARCA and becoming the first female in the booth for a national racing series. I think that it just opens doors. I feel like if there's producers out there that were maybe hesitant, I don't know, I've never seen a woman there. I don't know what it would sound like. What would people think? Hopefully they know now and they realize, like, I've got this woman, Amanda, she's amazing on camera. She can do the job. Let's give her a chance. That's my goal.
You mentioned a lot of firsts there, and earlier you called Pam Miller a trailblazer. Are you comfortable with that word being applied to you?
I think yes and no. I think, I'm flattered, and it's something that I've always carried happily. I'm proud to be in those moments because I feel like I've been given those opportunities to be the first because somebody believed in me, and it was up to me to deliver. And I'm fine with that. I've always been one that's willing to talk about it. I'm willing to talk to the younger kids, to anybody that wants to do what I'm doing. So yeah, I like that. But it took other trailblazers before me, and there'll be more, after me that will pave the way for all of us.
Well, we've mentioned Jacob and Pam so far. There is one other person that we talked to in preps of this interview, Frank Wilson. He mentioned that he knows that you're going to go into Daytona 100% more confident 1 year later in all the growth that you had last season, and that they can't wait to get the 2022 season started with you. When you think of the people that surround you in this business and the likes of Frank Wilson and Jacob Ullman, how important is it to have such a good team around you?
It is so important, but I think you can work with really nice people, awesome people, but you need to be around people that truly believe in you, that are good teammates and help your growth. And, I worked, no offense to the former network that I worked at, but it is so big that when you're in a certain role, like I was a pit reporter, that's all they saw me as. They wouldn't, I don't believe they would have ever given me this opportunity to do play-by-play because they saw me in one role. You're good at that. That's what we hired you to do. There's just too many other people that they need to plug into places. Then I switch over to Fox, and it's still core. And by that, I mean for how big Fox Sports is, how many broadcasts we do, how many sports we cover, it's still a core group of bosses. I still hear from all top bosses. I'll get texts or emails, good luck today on this show. And like, who does that? It's an amazing place to work. Obviously, they believe in me. And if they didn't, they would have said no and shut me down right away or made an excuse why I can't do play-by-play. So having people like Frank, who's, by the way, been involved in racing forever. He's seen it all, done it all, worked with all the talent. And Jacob Ullman just believes in his talent. They don't hire people they don't believe in. And it's really important because, they have your back. So what do? You go out and you bust your butt to make them look good and show them that you appreciate them.
What do you feel are one of the core competencies that separates the good from the great in your positions?
Oh, gosh, I think the ability to share, to be a teammate. I hate to say that, but there's no I in team. I've worked with people that are like that. It's all about me. It's my relationships. I've been here the longest. I get these stories. I'm not sharing them with you. So who loses in that situation? The viewers do. When we all come together, we share our information, and let's face it, between the Truck Series, ARCA, Xfinity, and Cup, and the practices and qualifying, there is just no time to be holding back your notes. We need to share, and we need to make sure that all the big stories get out there. So I think that's really an important factor, and that separates the good, from the bad, basically.
Well, as we go back to the beginning of your career in 2002, you started with ESPN. Talk about that journey to that first gig. What did you have to do behind the scenes to make that happen?
It's funny. I was going to school at San Diego State, and I doing everything I could. I loved Supercross racing, so I go to the races on the weekend, and I was helping out a website, like doing interviews and just getting to know the riders, getting to know the flow of like how things worked. And then the job came up to be the live announcer for the Supercross series, and I was 21 at the time. So I basically called them and said, I want an audition, whatever. And they said, well, we know who you are. We'll give you a shot. We know you're young. You don't have a lot of experience. You can do the first race at Anaheim, but nothing is guaranteed after that. I'm like, all right. So I did. And I ended up doing that for 4 years. But the cool thing was I would travel on the weekends for Supercross and make like $500. And then I was back in school, going to school Monday through Thursday for broadcasting. And at the same time, I also was doing some local work for ESPN2 for a show called Moto World. And I'd cover like the local races in Southern California. I covered that loosely. It was like my hand in the shot. And, I was getting these interviews. And then I started covering like rock crawling, I think was the first thing I ever covered on ESPN2. I thought that was the coolest thing ever. I don't even think I got paid for it, but I worked with the production company that did it, and it got my feet wet and got my face out there. So that's how it all started.
I hope you still have that tape.
I do somewhere. Oh my gosh. Of course, I'm driving a Jeep and I'm crawling up the mountain, and, I'm using the winch, and I had a blast. I mean, covering motorsports for television. I mean, I personally don't think there's anything more exciting.
Can you look at any influences in your early life or in your childhood that led you to know you wanted to be a broadcaster?
Yes. There were people in Supercross racing. Of course, they were all gentlemen. And I would look at them and think, gosh, I can do that. If he can ask those questions, I could definitely ask those questions. And I would start that kind of in high school. It kind of got it going. But I also always watched the Today Show with my mom, and I always admired Katie Couric. I'm actually reading her book right now, and it's just fascinating. But I always liked her. I liked her energy, her charisma, but she was also hard hitting. And I kind of have always tried to be that way. That you could be fun and, loving and outgoing, but you're not afraid to ask the hard questions. You're not just going to tee them up with those softballs. I'm not a fan of that. You can do both. So that's kind of somebody I tried to emulate a little bit. But those were my early influences. And of course, people like Barbara Walters and, the women who had been there way before us, just in television, in a boys' world. And they really had an impact on me.
Who's your biggest cheerleader?
I would say my mom and my husband are probably about the same. Yeah, my mom she raised me as a single mom. I'm an only child. She doesn't understand where the racing thing came from. It was all a shock to her when I was 15, and I put up posters of dirt bikes all over my walls because that was not something she was into. My mom, but she was always such a great example to me that if you're asked if you can do it, you say yes, and you figure it out later. And my mom was a great example of that. She went from being a seamstress for a show, with like the showgirls in Lake Tahoe in Las Vegas. She made the costumes like mid-20s after I was born, and ended up becoming the lead in one of those shows just a few years later. And she wasn't a dancer. So to me, that was kind of she was my role model. I kind of looked at that like, well, heck, if she could say yes and figure it out, well, I can do that with anything that I want to do.
Have you told her that?
Oh, yes. I say it all the time. And she's flattered. She's like, I can't believe that you still remember those things and still give me so much credit. But it's true. When you're a child, just certain things can stand out to you and make such an impact on your life. And I think having a strong female show me that things are genderless in life and that you don't necessarily need a man to take care of you, I think was very poignant. And I always looked at it like, I want to be married, but I want to be married because I'm in love with somebody and I want to be, not because I need to be.
You talked earlier about some of the hard hitting questions from other journalists. Well, in this industry, you were put in moments that sometimes those happen, whether it's incidents that happen on track or off track. How do you approach those?
Something I learned a while ago, and I learned the hard way too. Obviously, you're learning as you're growing up. If you're on national TV, you're going to learn good and bad in front of millions of people. And at ESPN, I feel like they were very centered around news. And if there was a story that broke, like a fight in a garage or something like that happened, they really pushed us to ask those hard questions right away. Get in there, find out, get to the bottom of it. And I did that a couple of times, and drivers would make me look like a fool on camera. Like, I did it to Kevin Harvick one time. And I learned my lesson right then that I'm the one with the microphone, and you can give me all the input you want. But when it comes down to it, I'm going with my gut instinct. I'm going to react in the way that I feel is appropriate. And that has never steered me wrong. So in those situations, whether it's a driver being killed or somebody at X Games knocked out who later dies, or a driver that, just barrel rolled down the front stretch at Talladega, or somebody that just got in a fight. You just kind of have to feel out the situation and ask the question people want to know, but it's all about the tone in your voice. And that's something that you kind of have to learn as a broadcaster.
When you think of 2 decades in the business and curating relationships throughout that time, how important is that when it comes to the credibility?
Relationships are everything. As you know, Amanda, you're not getting information if you don't have a relationship or they don't feel like they can trust you. So many people come and go in our sports and try to be the broadcasters and try to cover the sport, but it's all about the relationships. If you don't have those, you have nothing. As a reporter, you're telling stories. So you want to be able to walk up in the holler in the morning and, Alan Gustafson is willing to tell you what's going on with Chase Elliott. Like, hey, we had this issue yesterday. Like, it's embarrassing, but this is what happened. This went in wrong, and that's why we blew the engine. You want them to be able to feel comfortable telling you the story. And then I don't have to throw them under the bus, but I can tell the story in a way that kind of tells it like it is, but it doesn't make them look so bad. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's all about the relationships, being able to get the information that you need, and also getting down, in the surface and outside of racing, and getting to tell those personal stories too.
When you look at this new kind of era that's happening in motorsports and specifically in NASCAR, it seems the excitement for it, the desire for it, the thirst for it is as high as it's been in a really long time. How do you describe what's happening in this space?
I feel like NASCAR is in a great place. I've been there since 2007, so I've seen the ebbs and the flows. New cars come, new cars go, different packages come. People love or hate this driver, that driver, big names, moving on and retiring, and new faces coming up. I've seen all of it. I would say right now we are in such a good position. We've got a next gen car, which doesn't just mean it's the next generation of race car. We've got new places that we're going to, new racetracks. We've got different formats now. We have new faces, young drivers going for Rookie of the Year. We have amazing drivers like Chase Elliott, Kyle Larson, who are building, their resume, I guess, as you could say. They've already locked in their championships, and now people are taking notice and people are interested, excited. The Clash. I mean, this is a wild idea that NASCAR wouldn't have done 10 years ago, but they're doing it just to grow the sport, get more eyeballs on it, get people talking about it. And that's what it's all about. So I'm excited. I mean, as a broadcaster, you get bored doing the same thing all the time, going to the same racetracks. There's ones that you love going to, and there's ones that, I could do without that. So this year we get to see some new places like we did last season, and it keeps it fresh and it keeps it exciting, and it gives something for everyone, I think.
On your Twitter, your pinned tweet is about giving a voice to the voiceless. Tell us about the other passion of yours that is dear to your heart.
Yes, saving animals is huge to me. It's my true passion outside of work and family. And I've always just had an affinity for animals. And my mom said since I was a little girl, I just had like a special bond with them. And I felt it since I was little. I started riding when I was 8 years old. I was a tour guide at 9 and 10 years old. I would actually get tips for taking people on guided rides up in Lake Tahoe. And I got my first horse and trained him myself. And I always wanted a dog, but my mom just said it was too much responsibility. So I would sneak puppies home from the ranch and she'd make me take them back. So when I became an adult and, after a while and you get settled and you have your family and all of that, I realized that this is my platform. I need to do something with it. And here I am now. I've got 4 lazy rescue dogs all snoring around me right now. And I would have 20 dogs if I could. My husband is okay with that. But I'm all about, just spreading the message about animals and how many rescue animals. I don't care if it's a rabbit, a dog, a cat. They are out there. You just have to know where to go and look in your local community. And a lot of people, surprising to me, don't realize that there are good animals out there. They think they're all like ravenous, dog biting, dogs that just need to be put down. And it's not that way at all.
I hear you have one 4-legged creature up in Indiana from North Carolina.
Yes. Our first rescue was actually from there. Little Ike. We got him from the Boston Terrier Rescue of North Carolina. I think up New Bern area. He was our first boy. And yes, I've got a dog from LA that I got on Pet Finder. I've got a pit bull from here in Indiana. I've got a dog named Smokey that I met with Smoke we were at an appearance together in Florida, and I was flying home on his plane, and he's like, "You have to take that dog." Well, then he calls my husband, and he's like, "Let me talk to him." And my husband's like, "Okay, I'll meet you there. I've got a crate." So we have Smokey. And yes, and we've got a golden from Las Vegas, where I used to live and where I volunteered at the Animal Foundation.
I love that you are, while our audience is only going to hear this, I can see you looking around your room at your 4 beloved creatures alongside you during this interview. I think that's absolutely sweet, Jamie. When you look at your life right now, from the professional side to the personal side, what would you name this chapter of your life?
As good as it gets.
Wow.
I just can't imagine life could get any more full. And I think that's a really good place to be, where you're happy on the road working and you're happy at home. And a lot of people don't find that balance. And I work hard to keep that balance. My whole family does. I just lost my dad recently, and it makes you start thinking about life and mortality and all of those things. And I look at it now and just feel like this is as good as it gets. Now, how long can we keep it going? So I'm in a really good place right now.
Have you accomplished what you wanted to?
I would say I have accomplished what I've set out to and more. I mean, I was always doing it because I loved it. I didn't set goals necessarily through my career saying, okay, I want to get to this next level. Although when I turned 28, I was looking at the big picture when our contract was coming up with ESPN, and I thought, what am I going to do? They offered me football. I'm just not a stick and ball person. I'm sure I could figure it out, but I just wanted to stay true to what I loved. And having no idea that Fox was right around the corner and they came to us, that I had this opportunity. But you always feel like you're where you want to be and the top. People always ask me, when are you going to do Monday Night Football? And I just thought, well, a Sunday, I guess, would be my Monday Night Football. That's Cup on Sundays. So I've done that for many, many years now. And just what's the next, step to that? That was going into the booth. And now I think about what would I want to do? Well, I guess the next step would be moving up the ladder as play-by-play. That's the natural progression. And when you work so hard at something and you love it, you naturally want to go to the next step. So I think that would be it. But if it all ended tomorrow and I got replaced, I would say that I fulfilled everything that I hoped to.
At home, you have 2 children, both a son and a daughter, Carter and Sierra. When they see mom in these roles and news breaks of you being a trailblazer out there in our industry, what's it like sharing that with them?
Well, it's funny. They're just, they humble you. They're like, you're just mom to us. But it's funny, like my son, they'll go on the computer at library time, and I guess one of his classmates Googled me because he knew somehow that I was on TV, and my son's like, "You're famous," just because I'm on Google. And I'm like, well, I guess you could say that if you're saying people on TV are famous. But my daughter, actually, it's funny you said that. She's 5, and this morning she said, "Daddy turned on Fantastic Four, that movie, and we saw you in it." And I said, "Really?" I said, "Was that funny to see mommy back then? I was so young." And she said, "Yeah, So how did you get in that movie? So cute and simple. And, I just try to explain, well, they needed somebody, interviewing a writer, and that's what mommy did. So I was in the right place. So it's cute. I love life through kids' eyes. It's just beautiful.
Jamie Little on the Women Shifting Gears podcast, driven by Hemmings. Jamie, it is time for the hot lap. So if you're headed on a road trip, where are you going?
Lake Tahoe.
If you are in the left seat, you're driving. What car are you driving?
Gosh, I like a fast SUV. It's so hard. I love our Toyota Tundra because it's got the grumble, the grit. It's a very comfortable truck, but I also like a Range Rover. I have a Range Rover Sport that I just love. I've worked my butt off to get. That was kind of always like my top car, and I have it now. So it's fast and it's fun and big and safe.
What's on the radio?
Everything from Kids Bop for the kids to NASCAR radio and country or hip hop. I mean, the gamut. I'm all over the place.
If you could have one passenger on this road trip with you, both past or present, who would you take?
Gosh, that's a hard one. Oh, maybe I would go back to my answer earlier. Maybe somebody like a Katie Couric, because you could just pick their brain about their life in television and all of the moments that she experienced. Because as a broadcaster, you can relate in some small way. So somebody like her or Megyn Kelly. I love Megyn Kelly. Those are two women I think would be really interesting.
What's your favorite road snack?
Gosh, right now it is salt and vinegar almonds.
Those are so good. I just discovered those.
Have you had the pistachios? Because those are really good too.
I've also had the everything bagel cashews, by the way.
I have not. I saw those though. So good.
And Jamie, lastly, before we go, and thank you for your time and sharing your career and your path with us. And I am quite certain that the path ahead of you will trailblaze as well. But how do you want your impact on this industry for Jamie Little to be remembered?
To me, the biggest compliment is when somebody says, "You're my favorite reporter," not just my favorite female. Or somebody, a colleague just compliments how hard I work. I've always tried to be the one that outworks the next person because I never saw myself as the smartest person. I was terrible in school, but I will be willing to outwork somebody else just to get the job right. Doing my homework, I hope that this industry will remember me as hardworking, fair, and brave, I guess. I'm willing to go places that somebody hasn't gone before. And, hopefully that's my legacy. And, on top of that, I just want to be known as a good person with a big heart.
Well, as someone that definitely looks up to you, and it's fun to watch and see what you are achieving and accomplishing. Thank you for paving the roads for us.
Oh, well, thank you. You do an incredible job, Amanda. And thank you for having me on the show. It's so fun to have women, talking about these same industries. It wasn't like that 10, 15 years ago. There weren't a whole lot of us out there, and there's still not enough, by the way.
Jamie Little on the Women Shifting Gears podcast, driven by Hemmings. Thank you for listening to the Women Shifting Gears podcast, driven by Hemmings. Hemmings, your marketplace for the car collector enthusiast since 1954. This podcast is produced by GS Events.